Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wildcard Wednesday. My name is Ben Pulowski, and thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and joining us. So we're getting closer and closer to the ELD mandate next month, and today we're going to take a look at one of the newer features in Geotab Drive. Specifically, we're looking at diagnostics and malfunctions. So what those are, what they mean, what's going to happen within the interface in Geotab Drive, and how you can address them. I'm joined today by Jobin Thalchira, who is our one of our ELD engineers. So he's available to answer questions. So if you have any questions at any point during the webinar, you can type those into the questions box, and then we'll have some time after the presentation to answer some more of your questions as well. So let's go ahead and jump in here. So we have malfunctions and we have diagnostics. And essentially what these are is that they're messages that are going to appear in the Geotab Drive app, signifying that something is wrong, signifying that we're not getting all of the data that we should be getting. Not everything is being logged that should be logged. So they will alert drivers of problems with the ELD system. Some examples of these malfunctions or diagnostics you're going to see would be related to power compliance. So with the tablet or the phone receiving power, engine synchronization, so making sure that we're pulling all of the data that we need to from the vehicle's engine to be ELD compliant. Positioning related to GPS data, unidentified logs, making sure that logs are assigned to the correct driver, and also with timing compliance, making sure that all of the time coordinates are correct and that they are accurate. And these malfunctions and diagnostics are going to appear right here on the screen. So if you look over here on the right, you have this red bar that appears right here. So that red bar is going to appear whenever the Geotab Drive app is displaying a malfunction. If it's a diagnostic, it's going to appear as a yellow bar. And all the driver has to do is reach out and tap the bar, and it's going to bring them to the screen like you see here, where it's going to list all diagnostics or malfunctions. Depending on the diagnostic or malfunction, there are different steps required. And even within those steps, the driver has certain responsibilities and the carrier has certain responsibilities. We're going to talk about those specific driver and carrier responsibilities toward the end of the webinar today. So we have two different categories here. We have diagnostics and we have malfunctions. Now, a malfunction is worse than a diagnostic. So a malfunction is when it's happening more often or you're getting greater periods of time. Diagnostic is a singular event. It cannot be cleared by the driver and the system will auto clear. So just to go back to this previous screen, you can see next to the top one where it says engine sync compliance malfunction, and you have a button that says clear, and you can tap that button and it's going to clear it out. Below that, unidentified driving compliance diagnostic. There's no clear button. It's auto cleared by the system, and that'll depend on the actual diagnostic when that happens. So diagnostics, singular events, malfunctions are an aggregation or summation of diagnostic events. The driver has the option to clear them. So when you have that button that says clear, the driver can press it, or the system will also auto clear malfunctions. But you do want to make sure that whenever you get these diagnostics or malfunctions popping up in the app, that the driver does take note of them and takes necessary action. So these are the different diagnostics and malfunctions that can occur. This is all written in the language of the FMCSA. At the very end of the webinar today, I'm going to give you both a copy of this presentation as well as the diagnostics and malfunctions guide, which is sort of a quick reference for all of these. But we're going to start by going through some of these. Essentially what this says is that the ELD has to receive power within 1 minute of the vehicle being turned on. If the ELD does not receive power, that is a power data diagnostics event, and that diagnostic is going to appear, and you want to make sure that everything is connected as it should. Now, that diagnostic can become a malfunction if it's not receiving that power for 30 minutes or more over a 24-hour period. So remember, the diagnostic was a singular event. A malfunction is an aggregation of events. So if it's not gaining power when it should, and it happens for over 30 minutes over a 24-hour period, it becomes a malfunction at that point. Down at the bottom, all of these have a likely cause. This may be caused by an intermittent or disconnected connection to the vehicle ECM. This is likely due to an install issue. And I'll say that none of these diagnostics or malfunctions are really anything earth-shattering. It's really just the things that you should be paying attention to make sure that everything is working, that it has power, that everyone is in compliance and is doing what they should be doing. But we also have these simple steps here to take. So power compliance events, you really want to make sure that it has power and that it's connected and installed securely. Here we have unidentified driver logs diagnostic event. The diagnostic is going to occur if you have more than 30 minutes of driving in a 24-hour period with an unidentified driver on the ELD. So this is something that we are required to log and required to create a diagnostic if that occurs. When this happens, the diagnostic indicator must be turned on for all drivers logged into that ELD for the current 24-hour period and the following 7 days. Now remember, this is a diagnostic. Diagnostics cannot be cleared by the driver. The system auto clears them. This particular diagnostic is going to clear when unidentified driver time for the current 24-hour period and the previous 7 consecutive days drops to 15 minutes or less. Likely cause, review all unassigned logs when logging in or logging out of the vehicle. Ensure you've claimed any logs that may be applicable to yourself. So this goes back to when the driver logs into the app, it's going to ask them, these are the logs that are assigned to these vehicle. Are any of these logs yours? And the driver can claim any logs that belong to them. Additionally, on the admin side, it is the admin's responsibility to make sure that any unassigned logs are either being assigned to the correct driver or are being annotated with why they're being left unassigned. This is nothing new, but this is just highlighting that there are unidentified driver logs. If the unassigned logs are not yours, and I'm back down under likely cause, if the unassigned logs are not yours, you can ignore this diagnostic event. That's aimed at the driver. If it's an admin, you still want to make sure that you are assigning those unclaimed logs within my Geotab. This event will clear itself as logs get claimed. We have position compliance monitoring. And this is related to making sure that the GPS signal is valid and that we have all of the position data that we need. What we're looking for is a position measurement within 5 miles of the CMV's movement. When it is over 5 miles, when the discrepancy is over 5 miles, and that time exceeds a cumulative 60 minutes over a 24-hour period, that becomes a malfunction. Now, this is essentially treated like any instance where you're not getting GPS signal. So it can be temporary or permanent loss of GPS by the Go device. You want to install the inspection. So number one, make sure that it's installed correctly and plugged in all the way. Make sure if it applies that everything has a clear view of the sky, that there's nothing in the vehicle that might be blocking the signal. This might be something that you need to reach out to support or your reseller to troubleshoot. Maybe a problem with the Go device, but all this really means is that we're not getting the GPS signal that we require to stay compliant. A missing required data element diagnostic event. Now this is related to the one that we just looked at, the position compliance monitoring. So at times when we're unable to get a valid GPS signal or we're not sure of the location, what's going to happen is that the Geotab Drive app is going to prompt the driver to fill in location data. There's going to be a button when the driver reviews their logs that says, "Where was this?" And it's the driver's responsibility to fill in any location information that is missing due to a lost GPS signal. If the driver does not enter the location information and the vehicle is in motion, the ELD must record a missing required data element data diagnostic event for the driver. Likely cause, driver did not fill in the location manually when prompted. So the ELD Geotab Drive will prompt them to enter in the appropriate location information. We have engine synchronization monitoring. So there are certain pieces of engine data that are required for ELD compliance. So the ELD is required to pull data like the VIN, odometer, ignition events, and engine hours. The ELD must record an engine synchronization data diagnostics event when it can no longer acquire updated values for those required parameters that I just mentioned. That's the diagnostic. Now, if it keeps adding up and it keeps happening and we get to a point where we have 30 minutes over a 24-hour period where we're not pulling that engine data that we need, then it becomes a malfunction. Likely cause, this may be caused due to an intermittent or disconnected connection to the vehicle ECM. This is likely due to an install issue. So a lot of this does go back to a secure installation, making sure that it's plugged in all the way, that there are no gaps, that if necessary, you're using a harness or a zip tie to secure the device. Because when the device becomes loose in the diagnostic port or with the harness, you can start losing information like VIN and odometer. And that's required to be ELD compliant. So in this instance, you'd want to start by verifying the installation. Timing compliance monitoring. Basically, this says that the ELD must be synchronized to coordinated universal time, which is UTC. And you can't have a discrepancy of any more than 10 minutes. This is actually a very simple fix. Check your mobile device's phone time and ensure that it's set to acquire time automatically. If it's set to acquire time automatically, you shouldn't be running into this problem because it's going to do just that and everything should stay synced up. If it's not set to do that, then you can start getting some discrepancies and run into problems. So all of these malfunctions and diagnostics, there are certain responsibilities that fall on the driver, and there are certain responsibilities that fall on the carrier. So looking at driver's responsibilities first. Driver needs to note the malfunction of the ELD, and they must provide written notice of the malfunction to the motor carrier within 24 hours. The driver must reconstruct their records of duty status for the current 24-hour period and the previous 7 consecutive days on paper, unless they already have those records or they can retrieve them from the ELD. So if they can retrieve the current 24-hour period and previous 7 consecutive days from the ELD, that's fine. If not, they need to recreate them on paper. The third responsibility of the driver, they must continue to manually prepare rods on paper until the ELD is serviced and back in compliance. The recording of the driver's hours of service on a paper log cannot continue for more than 8 days after the malfunction. So a malfunction occurs. The driver notifies the carrier in writing within 24 hours. Retrieve their logs from the ELD, and if that's not possible, recreate them on paper, and they can use paper logs for up to 8 days. After 8 days, they're out of compliance. Now, these are the carrier's responsibilities when dealing with these malfunctions. After they've been notified in writing by the driver, it's the carrier's responsibility to correct, repair, replace, or service the malfunctioning ELD within 8 days of discovering the condition or a driver's notification to the motor carrier. The carrier must require the driver to maintain paper record of duty status until the ELD is back in service, again for a maximum of 8 days. Down here at the bottom, we have this link, malfunction documentation. And this is one of the 2 links that I'm going to send you off with here today. This document is required to be kept in the cab of the vehicle. This is a 2-page document. The first page looks at diagnostics, and it shows everything that we just went over. The power data diagnostic, engine synchronization diagnostic, missing required data elements, it's all here. Over on the right, you have what should I do next? And it gives you some insight as to why this problem happened and what should be done about it and how it can be fixed. Over on the right side, you also have some information, some screenshots of the app, what it's going to look like in the app to see these malfunction notifications and what they look like. So the first page of this document shows diagnostics. The second page displays the malfunctions. You have your power data malfunction, engine synchronization compliance malfunction, timing compliance, as well as the rest of it. You still have this what should I do next listed in the column to the right. And then here in the lower right side of the document, you have the driver responsibilities and you have the carrier's responsibilities. Again, this document is required to be kept in the cab of the vehicle. This must be printed out and kept in the CMV at all times. It's also not a bad idea for the administrator to maybe print this out and keep this as a reference if they are experiencing a lot of these diagnostics or malfunctions. So we have some time left for questions. Jobin, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm on the line.
Hey, Jobin, thanks for joining us today. So we've had a few questions that have come in here. So one question that just came in, we talked about how the driver has to notify the carrier in writing. Would an email, would that constitute in writing?
That's a gray area that we need to check with the FMCSA on. Personally, I think any email or even the messaging feature on the Drive app would suffice, but we'll need to verify that with FMCSA to confirm that what their definition of in writing is.
Okay, great. If it's in malfunction, can the driver use the ELD only and manually set statuses rather than using paper logs?
No, if the ELD is malfunctioning, the only thing you can use the Drive app for at that point is to present their past logs to the officer so they don't have to reproduce those logs on paper. But from the time of malfunction, they will have to revert to paper logs until the malfunction has been resolved.
If I do need to use paper logs, at what point is the driver required to pull over and start those paper logs?
So once they have let the carrier know of the ELD malfunction and they have identified a malfunction, they will have to pull over and start using paper logs from that point forward.
So after they've notified the carrier?
Yeah.
And then part of the driver's responsibilities were to have the current 24-hour period and the previous 7 days available. So if that's available on the ELD, that's fine. They would just use the paper logs moving forward from that point when they reported it.
Exactly.
Can the required documents be in electronic form?
Yes.
We actually we have an add-in in development that will be coming out hopefully within the next few weeks that allows you to access any required documentation directly through the Geotab Drive app. So we do expect to see that soon. When an edit is done in the back office, will the driver receive an alert or must they log out and log in to accept or reject the edit?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right when the edit happens, within 5 minutes or so, the driver will receive carrier edit requests where they can either accept or reject that edit.
And we have, has the September release been fully implemented yet? To my knowledge, it has, right?
Yes, the September release has been fully implemented, and we're now on our way with rolling out the November release. So there's about 15 servers that are on the November release now.
With regards to messaging, so is there a way for Geotab to alert the dispatcher when the driver sends a message from the app to the database?
Right now, there's no way of alerting the dispatcher. The dispatcher has to have that messaging feature of like in view of them, and then that messaging, that view will update constantly depending on messages coming in from drivers. But there's no way of notifying dispatchers at this time.
Right, so they would just want to basically keep an eye on the messaging page within the database.
Exactly, but like you don't have to refresh it all the time or anything like that. As long as you have it open and you're looking at it, it will populate with new messages.
So in the event that Geotab servers go down, what should the driver do if they cannot log into the app?
Right now, we don't support offline capabilities. So if they haven't logged in and the server goes down, they will not be able to log in because we won't be able to produce their previous 7 days of logs. But if they're logged in already, the app will work fine. Automatic statuses won't happen immediately, but once the server comes up, any of the previous automatic statuses that should have been there will repopulate.
So will drivers have to go into Geotab and enter in the paper logs? I assume that means after the malfunction, when the driver has been using paper logs for up to 8 days, and then the ELD is repaired, would they have to take those paper logs they've been using and add them into the system?
Yes, or they can just hold on to those paper logs until those 7 days have rolled off. Those are two different options they can take. There are various methods that we can efficiently upload those to my Geotab if they don't want to hold on to paper logs for those 7 days. And depending on the malfunction, we may be able to even continually create automatic logs accurately, depending on what the malfunction is. If it's like a positioning compliance or something like that, then obviously not. But if it's like has to do with unidentified driving, they can those logs will still be there and accurate.
How are errors that are automatically reported managed by Geotab? We've experienced a few instances where the driver gets the same error message over and over again. I would interpret that to refer to reporting a bug through the app. Jobin, if you could speak to that for a moment, just if someone reports a bug through the app, what happens from that point?
So if a driver reports a bug via the app, we get a case created on our side with all the debug information for that driver from that Drive app. If it's automatically reported, it's the same scenario, but it's just that case is just automatically created. We look at those and monitor those and make sure there aren't a ton of instances of the same issue, and we deal with those as they come in. With the November release and as we move towards the future and into next year, we're gonna be handling these errors better and not always having these drivers see these errors in the foreground and kind of do all this in the background. Right now, I know in certain scenarios, those errors can be distracting for the driver.
Would you say that it's a best practice, even if the driver reports a bug through the app? Is it a good idea for them to still tell their carrier and have their carrier open a support ticket?
100%. It's always good to know. There's no such thing as too much information. So the more information we get on an issue, the better it is and easier it is for us to resolve.
For auditing purposes, the logs they had to create on paper. Oh, okay. So if there's a malfunction or the server went down and the driver is recording the logs on paper, those do not need to be added into my Geotab. Is that correct?
Yes, so that is correct. They can just hold on to the paper. If it's with the malfunction, they have to hold onto those paper logs or they have to recreate my Geotab. But if the server goes down, there's no need to hold on to paper logs. We will repopulate those logs once the server comes up. We don't have extended downtime unless it's called for. So unless there's an upgrade that takes hours, but before we do any sort of long downtime, we always let the customers know and give them a heads up. Most of the time, the downtime is around 30 minutes or less. If it's anything more than 30 minutes, we will notify all the customers and parties involved and we'll schedule it at an appropriate time where the least amount of drivers will be impacted by the downtime.
And just to add on to that point, I mean, while it's not required to add it into to my Geotab, it's also not a bad idea because, I mean, if you're looking at your reporting for the week, or if you're looking at violations or you're looking at availability, if they're on paper logs, you're going to be missing some data there. So not required, but it certainly wouldn't do any harm. So, question just on entering a support ticket. So that's not something that a driver would do. So that a carrier can open a support ticket by contacting whoever they normally contact for support, whether that would be their reseller or their account manager or whoever it is that they deal with. Do you think it'll be up and running before the 18th? So that would be that in-app or the add-in for the required documentation, I believe that's referring to.
Yeah, so the add-in should be available before the 18th. We want to get all our ducks in a row before the 18th, and right now it's looking like we will meet that deadline.
Okay. This next one, so this is a good question. The driver can legally keep running paper logs until they get back to the shop and get a new ELD installed, even if that means drivers using paper logs for more than 8 days. And that's, as I understand it, the answer to that is no. The maximum is 8 days.
Yeah, that's exactly. The answer to that is no. On the 9th day, you cannot drive. You'll be in violation. You're out of luck if you're not able to resolve this malfunction within 8 days. That's why it's always good practice to maybe have 1 or 2 extra devices on hold to make sure that you're not in a situation where it's taking 8 days to resolve this issue with your ELD and you have a spare device or 2 that you can just pop in and continue on driving.
Should the compliance report show the DVIR as well? So the compliance report referencing what's shown to the DOT officer during a roadside inspection. No, that information is not required. So we give you the option to complete your vehicle inspection reports through Geotab Drive, but the regulations are actually separate, so that's not part of the compliance report. When is the November rollout going to start? Which of course includes the wireless transfer or the email transfer option to the DOT officer.
Right, so November release has already started. I think I mentioned this earlier in the presentation that we have about 15 servers out of 200 on it already. In terms of the transfer option functionality, we're not going to enable that until closer to the date of. Drivers will be able to see that transfer button and play around with it, but it's not going to do what it's intended to do until that date. We're closer to that deadline of the 18th.
Right. So you'll have a button that says transfer, but it's not going to be functional until we're pretty much right at the ELD mandate date.
Right, and the FMCSA is not going to be accepting those files until that time either. I think right now that server that supports that file transfer is actually offline.
Great. Jobin, thank you again for joining us today, and thank you to all of our attendees for taking some time out of your day. If you have any further questions, of course, we recommend that you reach out to your support staff or your account manager or your reseller or whoever it is that you normally contact with any questions. Thanks for joining Wildcard Wednesday, and we hope you all have a great day, and we'll see you next time.